Okay, online folks, I'm going to have you be part of the case today. So you are going to do the treatment effectiveness part for both cases. So there's the case of Rachel in chapter 11 and the case of Danielle in chapter 12. So you're going to do the last part of the case study worksheet. And just in case you missed that link, here it is. This should open a copy of it. And I'm going to go ahead and put you in a breakout room so that you all can talk about it yourself and don't need to worry about me like hovering over you. And I'm going to set it for 15 minutes. If everyone else finishes before that, I'll bring you back sooner. All right, so let me go ahead and get that done. And then obviously you all won't be able to write it on the board, so you can just document it on the case study sheet, and then we can have you screen share when we get to your part. So I'm gonna go ahead and open the room for y'all. Here are our markers, and if anyone does want to use the chalkboard, there is chalkboard. Yeah, so why don't we do chapter 11 sort of there, and we have to go there and there and do we don't need to talk about it. So let's say up to like this table there, this is chapter 11. It's a choice. And it has pockets, which is the best. Unfortunately, it is Wheeler Road, and those countries, but, you know. Alrighty, there we go. The other two groups ready to write stuff up? And feel free to bleed over onto this board or the chalkboard if anybody needs to. Okay, so especially because my voice is awful, I'm gonna try this today and have the captions going. while I'm talking. We still got a couple groups finishing up writing, which is totally cool. And then we'll have everybody go around and walk everybody through it. I know Zoom people, there's no way you can read the board unless your eyes are like way better than mine, but people will talk through everything, so you'll be able to hear it. Alrighty, so we will now talk through these and I will try to turn the computer a little bit this way, so hopefully you'll be able to see and hear folks as they talk. So let's start with Rachel. So our group over here, tell us about who Rachel was and what was her background in history.
So Rachel, at the time of her accident, was 14. She has plans to graduate at 17 and attend university. She's extroverted, physically active, and has divorced parents. Like I said, at 14, she hurt her while skiing. And was told to rest and that she may have a concussion.
Yeah, a little bit more I had with her. She was a really good student, the top student in her class before her accident. Had varied interests, as you would expect someone like that to be: music, art, swimming, aerobics, and the unfortunate skiing. Not that skiing in general is unfortunate, it just was for Rachel, right? Her father was Maori, which are the native or indigenous Polynesian peoples of New Zealand. They're about 15% of the population there. And then her mom was Pakia or Pakaya, I think. And this is like the Maori word for non-Maori people. It's sort of like Muggle for humans in Harry Potter world. Yeah, and so then she fell skiing. She fell and hit her head on the bottom of a pylon supporting the chairlift. Not great, right? Honestly, probably lucky she was alive. We know that skiing accidents can be fatal, right? All right, what were her symptoms?
Trouble concentrating with her memory. She could remember anything clearly. She was irritable, or she laughed when she laughed.
Yeah, yeah. obviously her school performance deteriorated, and you had this really social girl who now is just like spending all her time by herself, right? So that's a huge change. All right, what were the testing results for Rachel? Yeah, so here's someone that should be scoring really high all over. We still see a couple scores that are able to stay pretty high, right? But then as you pointed out, some of her scores are low for her, right? It's kind of like when we talked about the doctor who got Parkinson's, right? Like it made sense that his scores were like average because that was low for him, right? But because of that, the inexperienced person missed that they should be higher, right? For a medical doctor. Yeah, exactly. All righty. So impact on life and family. Oh, sorry, what was the diagnosis? Exactly. Yeah, and then the psychological diagnosis was depression. And that can be just as important to keep those types of diagnoses in the mix because we know that depression does have effects on your ability to process things at an efficient rate, for example. Yeah, excellent. Okay, now to impact on life and family. Yeah. The only other thing I had was that she did have to leave school for a little bit, but then she was able to return later on, which was great, especially for such a high achieving person. Alrighty, our online folks. Oh, we got a chat message here. Yeah, it's really hard to hear. I'm sorry, Amanda. That's what I'm trying to summarize afterwards. So I apologize. Yeah, we would need, there are microphones that are like balls. We need that to like throw to each other, and I don't have one. So I'll just keep trying to summarize. What's that? Yeah, all that too. But let's have you all, our online folks, tell us about what they did for treatment and how effective it was.
Essentially, what they did is they slowly, very slowly reintroduced the activities that she normally would do into her life, but they were very careful about it and gave her a laid out and planned social schedule where she's very slowly being introduced to more school and more social interactions, and it was devised to get her more and more active over time, which it worked eventually. So yeah, it was very effective as well.
Yeah, which is great. Yep. And again, thinking about treating the whole person, she had psychotherapy to address the depression. As you all said, they taught her to pace herself, which was really important. And then she had a tutor, and then it was eventually back into all the classes. So this is a nice example of a happy ending to one of these, right? Like young person, right? Able to rebound and able to, probably not return totally to pre-morbid functioning, but able to at least integrate back into her life as it was before that. Alrighty, well, let's talk about Danielle. And again, start with our front group here.
So Danielle is a 36-year-old mother of twins who works full-time in a physical state. She had a background of being a heavy smoker for 20 years, but over the past few years, she had reduced to only smoking 10 cigarettes a day. And she was experiencing heavy stress because of everything going on with her life, like her father's diagnosis and her husband's getting laid off and being.
Yeah. That's a lot of stress all at once, right? Yeah, and so here's someone who's married, 12-year-old twins, seems to have a pretty stable family. And I don't know if the symptoms group will cover this or not, so I'll just say it. Again, I need to have a what happened, I think, that I add to this, which is she was at the beach with her family and she felt like her head exploded. So let's go ahead and have our next group describe the symptoms.
She felt her left arm and left face, she was easily tired and she had memory difficulties, especially and she had a left-sided which made her feel cracks.
Yeah, and you can imagine for someone who A, likes to craft themselves and B, works at a daycare, right, where you usually do a lot of crafts with the kiddos, so that would be extra frustrating. Yeah, so here's someone who was able to return to work, but not at the same level. Had to rest when the kiddos napped. Her memory for names of the children and the parents were impaired. So, certainly a change despite being able to resume some normal activities. All right, what about our testing results? Mhm. Right, yeah. So she had a hemorrhage, essentially kind of on the surface of her brain. So the arachnoid is like this, it's called that because it looks like a spider web and it kind of covers the whole brain. And it was big, basically between that and the cortex. Yeah, and so that's why she felt like she had been struck on the head, is because she'd actually had this aneurysm. Yeah, and you did a great job describing. A lot of her stuff was normal. I mean, she had some anxiety. Who doesn't, right? Like, especially in the situation she's been in, even before her SAH, right? Yeah, so a lot of really interesting results from the test that basically came down to she's mostly doing okay, except for the symptoms we've already described. Alrighty, impact on life and family. Yeah. So, it made it pretty stressful on her family for a while, right? We mentioned already she did go back to work, but it was tough. She was able to talk it over with her boss, who was pretty understanding, so she only worked mornings for a while. And then she would like quiz herself on the names of the kids and the parents so that she'd remember them. And she had problems with intimacy with her husband because she was afraid to have another hemorrhage. You know, sex is a pretty active act in a lot of cases, right? And so it gets a lot of the same types of things going that people would experience during an event like this or a panic attack or something like that. Yeah. Alrighty, our online folks, treatment and effectiveness.
So the way they treat it is they treat it in one of two ways. They'll either do surgical clipping of the aneurysm, which prevents it from having the possibility of bleeding again, or endovascular coiling, which involves the insertion of tiny platinum coils into the site of aneurysm, and it attracts blood, platelets, and fibrogens to clot the aneurysm. And the surgical clipping is a more dangerous one, and it's more invasive, and the endovascular coiling one is most of the time the better option to take, and as technology gets more advanced, it's becoming better and better.
Yeah, so they did clip hers 24 hours after admission to the hospital, but then her condition went after that. They treated her for vasospasm. They increased volumes of IV fluids. They tried to raise her blood pressure. They had a calcium channel blocker they put her on. That basically protects your cells in your brain from too much apoptosis, programmed cell death. With that treatment, the arm and face weakness and numbness resolved. She was discharged after 3 weeks in the hospital, was told to rest at home. She had a good recovery for the first 3 months. Our last group already mentioned the family therapy, which seemed to be helpful. And the kids found ways to like help dad cook or bring mom breakfast in bed and things like that. She also really enjoyed what we call psychoeducation, which is to read articles about her condition. Sometimes that's almost like a magic cure for people because they're like, oh, this isn't just like some random thing. This is something that other people experience too. And the other thing is she gave up smoking. Right? Yeah, as we said, typically this kind of comes out of the blue, but certainly anytime you have something like a stroke or hemorrhage in the brain and you're smoking a lot, we're going to look at that and probably recommend maybe don't, right? Maybe don't do that anymore. So yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So she made a comment that she felt like her head exploded,
Mhm.
but we could also do things like brain surgery while awake. So where are the pain neurons in the brain? Like what
That's a
tissues-
legit question. Yeah, and I wonder how,
tissues hurt?
yeah, I'm wondering how much of it might be like on the skull or that area. That's a legit question that I don't necessarily know the answer to. I think they probably do some numbing for brain surgery, but because well, they have to numb the skull, right? Because
With this thing.
yeah, they actually take it a chunk out of the skull in order to do brain surgery. And they put it back in. Although some brain surgeries they're able to do with just like a small hole they drill through. They do this with a lot of like abdominal surgeries now too. They call them laparoscopic. And rather than a giant incision, you might just have like 6 little things that they put these things through, and there's actually like robotic laparoscopic procedures now in some cases as well. So like the robot is the one that does the things with the guidance of the surgeon. But yeah, that's a good question. That'd probably be a good Google or YouTube search. 'Cause I don't actually know. Yeah, definitely. Kind of like how Henry was talking about, we keep improving our technology and that keeps giving us better, more effective, more efficient treatments that allow us to look at these things in ways that we never could before, right? I mean, if this had happened to Danielle 50 years before, certainly 100 years before, she would have just probably died, right? Like the fact that we've come that far. And, I think Ogden did most of these cases in the 80s and 90s. So the fact that, yeah, but let me just, I used the first edition of this book when I was in college in the 2000s, and they haven't changed that much, so they existed before that. But yeah, so like, it's probably even more effective now, basically.
It makes you wonder what procedures we do regularly now that we'll look back and be like, what butchery was this?
Right. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the fourth Star Trek movie, the one with the humpback whales. But they like go back into the past because they need these humpback whales to communicate with these aliens. It's a very like tenuous premise, but so they're like on Earth in the 70s, and their ship's doctor, they're like walking through the hospital, and he's like, "What do you mean they're using dialysis? How primitive!" And like gives this guy just like one pill that makes his kidney function return to normal. Yeah, I'm sure there are going to be procedures like that for sure. I think there's also probably procedures that we don't give anesthesia for now that will be like, what were we doing in the future? Like I know.
Children, like we would see baby circumcision because we just assumed they didn't feel or did not remember the pain, it didn't matter.
Yep. Still happens. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question because we didn't find out the sex of our baby till she was born. And then kind of said, well, what do you want to do about circumcision? And we both said like, no, we'll wait, let that be his decision if it's a boy later on. And the doctor was kind of surprised because I think a lot of people are just like, well, it's a thing we do, right? So we'll do it. But yeah, exactly what you said. They used to just assume the baby was fine. Much, right? Yeah. Any other questions that came up for you as we were thinking about either Rachel or Danielle's cases? So this chapter in your book is kind of a mumble jumble of a bunch of different things, right? Some of which we've kind of talked about in passing previously. So I have a couple fun videos that we can look at that we will start with here. I just need to exit out of this, drag this out of my way. Here we go. And so the first thing I have is an animation of what happened to Danielle.
2020, over 770,000 of us did our civic duty and voted. Together, we changed our country. Now we're all doing it again and voting for Democrats like never before. Make your voice heard today.
Don't forget to vote.
Traumatic
It's coming up.
damage occurs when an acceleration force, such as the impact of a motor vehicle accident or blunt force trauma, causes the brain to move inside the skull. Rapid movement of the brain puts stress on blood vessels in the subarachnoid space, which causes them to rupture. The subarachnoid space, which is normally filled with cerebrospinal fluid, fills with blood. Compared to a subdural hematoma, bleeding in a subarachnoid hemorrhage is spread diffusely through the subarachnoid space, so it does not produce massive pressure on the brain tissue as rapidly. Complications can arise if the subarachnoid hemorrhage produces cerebral vasospasms, which can lead to permanent brain damage.
So you can see that, it just, because there's not much space there, it's gonna seeps around the whole brain, right? You might kind of think like, oh, well, what's the harm? Well, anytime we have fluids that aren't supposed to be someplace in our body that are there, it's problematic, right? It's just like if you have some sort of internal injury after an accident, there's blood going in your abdomen where it's not supposed to be, it's just never a good thing, right? So that's important. I have another video that's like a personal story of someone who struggled with this.
My name is Jacob Amelot, and I'm 34 years old in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm a stroke survivor. I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage, brain hemorrhage back in January 3rd of this year. I was in a coma for 3 months. I woke up in March, paralyzed, couldn't move, couldn't talk. I had a trach, I was on a ventilator, I was on life support. I had 6 operations, a BP shunt put in my head, coils in my back, a tube in my tummy called a peg tube, so I could eat because I couldn't swallow. And I could not move my body, my legs, my arms. I was pretty paralyzed, and it was a really scary experience. I just came back from New York, visiting my family over there for Christmas and New Year's. We drove back to Boston, at a slight headache that evening. And I woke up 3 months later, not knowing what hit me. It was like a Twilight Zone episode from hell. Anyway, I spent months and months in rehab, and through the goodness of others and through the help of many, many people, and intensive physical therapy, I was able to walk again. And actually yesterday was the first time I jogged at my gym during my physical therapy session. So I was quite amazed because way back in March, when I woke up from my coma, my only dream back then was to walk. Someday feeling on something with my feet and my legs and move my arms. And I would look outside my window and just look at all the cars, and I'm such a car freak, I love cars. I just bought a new car last year, I bought a Volkswagen CC, I love that car. I literally drove it for 2 months, November and December, and then I had this unfortunate event in January. So the car was pretty much sitting there in our garage at home that whole year, this whole year. My only dream was Sunday, just driving it. Anyway, I've been driving since August, September this year. And it just feels so great and liberating. And I'm very, very fortunate that I'm one of the 5% of people that would ever survive, a subarachnoid hemorrhage attack. And considering that most people, 50% of people died within 3 hours. Thankfully, my mom found me in my room. She thought I was initially having a heart attack. Then she called 911 and was taken to the hospital down the street from my house. And they said, "Oh, we can't handle this because it's just a small hospital." So they took me by ambulance to that Israel hospital. And then on the way there, I was already dying. I literally died for 15 seconds. They had to electric shock me a number of times just to revive my heart again. Anyway, after coils and a shunt and 6 operations later, here I am. And I just have to say that I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for my mom, the prayers of my friends and family back home in the Philippines and New York, and here in Boston. And I just had to focus on getting better. I could not give up. Actually, when I was at that Israel hospital in Boston, and still in the wheelchair, could barely even wheel my wheelchair down the hall. There were many times that I really wanted to cry and just give up, and I was just looking around, the hallways, and there are all these other patients in their wheelchairs. And I thought, oh God, I have to get out of here. I have to get out of this hospital. I have to get out of this building. There's a whole world out there. And for me, being trapped in that place was so difficult because, I traveled a lot for work. I also lived in Los Angeles. I've lived abroad most of my life growing up, and I traveled almost every month. I had frequent flyer miles for United, for Virgin, for British Airways. I pretty much went anywhere, everywhere. I backpacked all around Italy last year and Spain. I went to Sydney. I went to, Bondi Beach and surfed there, and, I had a great life. I had a wonderful family, a great car. I had a Mercedes back home in Los Angeles. I had a Volkswagen CC here in Boston. I have great friends. I had a boyfriend back then from Harvard. I mean, I was starting my whole new life back here in Boston when I moved back in October. I came back for the Mass Challenge competition. And although I didn't win the $1 million prize for the startup, I did actually, gain contacts at Bain Capital, and they said, okay, we would fund you, JP, as long as you actually launch your company. Well, I never got to launch my company because I had this unfortunate incident in January, and here I am, 12 months later, still trying to pick up the pieces and basically start off where I started. Yeah, it's been a very challenging year, but why am I making this video? It's because I feel like there's a lot of other people out there, my age, older, younger, who are also in a similar situation out there, maybe like lying down on a hospital bed somewhere, almost giving up. There were many times that I also wanted to give up, but I didn't. So I didn't give up because I thought that if I gave up, it would be a complete waste of this opportunity to come back from the dead. And literally I felt that God gave me another second chance to live, to go for my dreams, to launch my company, to be with my mom, my dad, my family, to get out of this damn hospital, to get a puppy. And I did. He's over there right now. That's Milo. That was just my dream when I was at the hospital, is to get the hell out of here. I'm gonna get a puppy, and I did. I drove all the way to Connecticut and found him. So yeah, it's not over, I feel like, until it's over. And I know so many people out there.
So you get the general gist of what it's like for people. I mean, you can hear that he experienced some of the same depression, right? That we talked about. Again, maybe not surprisingly, when your whole life changes, and he was like right on the brink, right, of something really good happening. And then this happened. But I really like how he frames it, where he's like, I had to just realize, like, I was lucky I was alive, and that I wanted to like do something with my second chance. Again, I know that these are like downer videos sometimes, but I think it's really important to look at what actually happens to people who have these things, right? What their experience is like, what it's like for them to go through all these procedures. Yeah, let's see what we got here. So Emily shares this section on brain injuries has really had an impact on me and my family. When my mom was pregnant with me, my dad's brother was hit by a drunk driver. Oof. Resulted in permanent brain damage to his frontal lobe. He'd been in a coma for a few weeks, but woke up from it. But his damage to the frontal lobe was and still is not something that is irreversible. It's almost been 23 years. With March, she has taken part in so many different therapies and totally done so much. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Emily. And that can happen, right? You can have people who, 22 years of living after something like that is amazing, but like you might never get back to where you actually want to be. And that can be frustrating for you and sometimes for your family as well. And so because Emily just mentioned coma, and so did our JP that we just watched the video. I wanted to show you this. This is the Glasgow Coma Scale. This is essentially how you tell how alert someone is, either like coming out of a coma or staying within the coma.
Friends would walk up to me.
In this case, the patient has spontaneous eye opening and scores 4.
Hello, Mr. Murray, can you hear me?
Here the score is 3 as he only opens his eyes to speech. If the patient only responds to a painful stimulus, he scores 2 on eye opening. And in this instance, there is no response and therefore a score of 1. When assessing eye opening to pain, you should use nail bed pressure, as supraorbital pressure will only cause the patient to grimace.
So that's just one part of it, but gives you an example of some of the things that they do to see, like, where's this person at right now? Last video I'll show today is the different types of stroke, which I know we've talked about in the past, but I don't think we've actually looked at what those look like in an animation. So we'll watch this.
A stroke, also called brain attack or cerebral vascular accident, occurs when brain cells die from oxygen deprivation. Oxygen deprivation occurs if blood flow to the brain is blocked by a clot or if vessels are damaged. Without oxygen, brain cells cannot function. There are 2 types of stroke, hemorrhagic and ischemic. A hemorrhagic stroke occurs when a blood vessel in the brain bursts due to high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, or a congenital malformation. A burst vessel causes bleeding into the brain and decreased blood flow in the damaged vessel. Blood buildup increases pressure in the brain, damaging nerve cells and collapsing smaller vessels. The second type of stroke is ischemic stroke, which occurs when blood flow through a vessel is blocked. There are 3 categories of ischemic stroke: thrombotic, thromboembolic, and embolic. A thrombotic stroke occurs when flow in a blood vessel in the brain is obstructed by arteriosclerosis. A thromboembolic stroke occurs when a clot breaks off from an arteriosclerotic plaque and lodges in a downstream vessel, blocking blood flow. An embolic stroke occurs when a clot travels to the brain from elsewhere in the body. Patients with atrial fibrillation or who have suffered a heart attack are at high risk of embolic stroke. This is because slow, irregular, or interrupted blood flow has a tendency to clot. Sometimes an individual will experience a transient ischemic attack, TIA, which is temporary and improves before cells die. A TIA is a precursor to a thrombotic stroke or short-term embolus.
And you can have a TIA without even knowing you had one. Like, can be so minor that you just have no idea. So let's stop there for today. And then we'll pick up talking about brain injury and some of this other stuff going forward on Thursday. And you should be able to see what your quiz score is already because they're auto-graded. All right, thanks for participating, Zoom people. Have a good one.